Hello, love bugs, and welcome to Love Bug Lounge, a podcast about self-love. Tune in, transform, and continue your growth with me, your host, Mia Rose, and occasionally my dog Buddha when he feels like joining me. Welcome back, love bugs. Thank you so much for tuning back in for episode 2. I first have to say, you cannot imagine how incredibly grateful and how much it has meant to me to receive all the positive feedback and the love that I have. I want to thank all of my wonderful friends that listened, that shared, reposted, and just interacted in general. It truly made my heart burst every time I saw it. Today's episode is extremely near and dear to my heart. I want to dedicate this episode to my amazing grandpa who unfortunately passed away this Thanksgiving. He was such an eccentric, sweet, and unique soul who taught me so much about life, art, and taking chances. He was always making friends with strangers, telling dad jokes completely backwards, and really was just a joy to be around. His favorite message? Be kind to yourself. He used to write this phrase on everything. He would make little note cards and give them to you on Christmas or your birthday or really just to random people on the street. It was a constant reminder that I needed, and so today I'm here to share his message and his philosophy with you. This episode will dive into why it's important to be kind to yourself, all of yourself, even the parts we don't love and the parts that we want to change. And we'll be talking about our emotions and why every single one of them is actually one of the good guys. All right, Grandpa, where do we start? Well, first let me do a bit of myth busting. In case nobody has told you, there are no such things as a bad emotion. I know. Crazy, right? Often people are uncomfortable with our negative emotions, especially when we're growing up. So they teach us or they scare us into bottling it all up. Our anger gets punished, our question and curiosity is viewed as disrespect, our sadness is viewed as annoying or weak, our feelings of insecurity are made fun of or scoffed at, while all of our positive emotions are praised. So after years of the same responses, we hide all the bad and we present a cool, calm, collected, happy, confident version of ourselves, the best that we can. Maybe that version is a bit louder or quieter, more go with the flow, more flirtatious, more cocky, or less opinionated. But whatever it is, we present the version of ourselves that's been met with the most praise, and usually alone try to navigate what we think is the bad, but it's the more scorned part of ourselves. But life and all its circumstances requires someone that's multifaceted, not a perfect robot. So often we feel a lot of shame when these hidden parts come out. We also feel really uncomfortable when someone else's hidden or negative emotions are exposed to us. Many people end up chastising this person the same way they were when they first tried to show up authentically to somebody. So we first have to realize that every emotion is there for a reason. They're teachers. They show us things that are important. Every emotion is just input from our environment. It's a message. It's trying to tell you something, and it's important that we listen to it instead of trying to get rid of it. Our brains were not meant to keep us happy and agreeable 24/7. They were meant to keep us alive. They were meant to help us self-actualize, which usually, often, is uncomfortable. For example, anger or defensiveness. Anger is usually just protecting pain. Anger is protecting a vulnerable part of yourself. Anger is it's like the dog that attacks you when you accidentally touch a wounded part of it. Anger is just your protection, and realizing that can help you let go of some of that anger. But anger also shows you what you care about, what's important to you, what you're willing to stand up for, what you're willing to fight for. Without anger, laws couldn't be changed. Another example is envy or jealousy, which is extremely uncomfortable, and we might even feel shame for having them. And when you feel shame, what do? You immediately try to push it away. But envy is one of the greatest teachers. It shows you what you need to pour more time into. It shows you what you want for yourself. For example, a while ago, this was a long time ago, it feels like now, my boyfriend and I went to a get-together, a kickback. I didn't know anyone there, but everyone was really cool. I was having a great time until a couple hours in, they decided they wanted to have like a group podcast right there on the spot. They started like setting up some lighting. They were looking at all of our phones to see which phone could record it the best. And I felt sick to my stomach immediately. Envy started taking over my body, and it was such a strong feeling. I remember being confused. I was like, I don't even know these people, and the feelings of envy are so strong that I'm judging their setup, and I feel like almost protective over the podcast. Like podcasting could only be mine, and I had to sit in that motion. And in sitting in it, I realized I had been putting off my own podcast. That was a time that I kept pushing it to the side. I kept making excuses for why it wasn't the right time to start it. And that experience showed me that the podcast was something really important to me, and I needed to start prioritizing that. But without that envy, I would have never gotten that lesson, and maybe this podcast wouldn't be here now. A couple years ago, I would have listened to this episode and said, sit in my emotion. What do you mean, sit in my emotion? Isn't that just letting it take you over? And if it's not just letting it take you over, then how do you do that? How do you not let the feeling completely consume you? As we learned in the first episode, I am a very all or nothing person. So a couple years ago, or, in childhood, either the feeling had to get completely pushed away or it took over everything. There was no in between. To anyone who could relate to this, let me just remind you, you are not your emotions. You are not your emotions. You are the person feeling them. You are not your thoughts. You are the person observing them. You're simply the person bearing witness to it all. So when I start to feel an emotion that feels very overwhelming, I remind myself of this. And then if even then I start to feel too sucked into the emotion where it starts to cloud my actions or maybe change the way that I'm talking to myself or talking to others, I try to put some distance between me and the emotion. The way I do this is I try to become really curious about the emotion. I start to ask about it almost as if it's not my own feeling. Why am I feeling it? Why is this really there? What might this mean instead? Asking these questions allows my brain to slow down my thinking, stop the narrative that it's spinning, and usually allows me to realize like, oh, that's right. It's 5 p.m. and I haven't ate today. Or, wow, I really do need to take that nap. Or, dang, that comment that my friend said is still actually really sticking with me. Often the questions help me, and hopefully you, if you try this method, it helps me try and find the real root of the emotion that's there. I do stand behind that there are no bad emotions. However, this doesn't mean to keep subjecting yourself to the uncomfortable feeling and keep reliving the situation that's working you up. Obviously, that is a lot easier said than done. And this isn't advice for traumatic situations. The brain, the body has to handle that in a completely different way. So this is really just advice for those petty, irritating things that could happen day to day. For example, let's say I know this has happened to probably everybody in customer service, but let's say you're having a really great day at work. Everything's gone really smoothly. You're just about to leave when a customer makes a rude comment to you. And even when the customer has left, even when the situation is over, you just can't get the rude comment out of your mind. As we've been talking about, don't push it away and say it's fine if things aren't fine, but also don't let it ruin the rest of your day. Feel the emotion, validate yourself, validate the experience, learn a lesson from it if you can, and then let the emotion pass. The person shouldn't be allowed to affect your whole perfectly good day. They absolutely do not deserve that power. A good thing about understanding our own emotions is it usually makes you, even accidentally, better at understanding others. This has helped me so much in interactions, realizing most people's anger and aggression or whatever negative thing they're taking out on me has usually more to do with themselves, which for me has been incredibly freeing. I don't take half of what I used to personally now, and for me it's helped me treat others with more kindness and compassion. I know a lot of people have never been taught healthy coping mechanisms, and for them it's easier to hurt others than feel their own pain or appear as weak. And I don't see the point of fighting fire with fire. So I just try and show them love. It is absolutely not fair and not okay that anyone treats you unkindly. And I'm not asking you to not stand up for yourself. Even I am quick to stand up for myself. But I also don't let anyone's belittling words stick with me or change my view or the treatment of myself. What also helped me find peace in day to day was a lesson I took from Evan Almighty. If anyone's seen that movie, that was my childhood favorite movie. I probably watched that every single week. But it's a lesson that life often gives you opportunities instead of qualities. If you want to be a more patient person, is it more likely that one day you'll wake up and you'll just have patience? Or that coming home from work or school, you'll get stuck in 2 hours of traffic and have the opportunity to be patient through it? Unfortunately, it's probably the latter one. And this goes for anything. Being slow to anger, being a more giving person, standing up for yourself, being more outgoing. We rarely inherently have the quality we want and instead are given lessons and chances to learn it. Lastly, if you feel yourself getting really hurt by others' judgments, this is something that helped me detach a lot from their words and from what they wanted me to be and the life that they wanted me to live. I had to look at their life and ask myself, is this the life that I aspire for? And they might have had a perfectly good life, a respectful lifestyle, but that still might not be what I was striving for and what you're striving for. I feel like this is a really big thing between kids and their parents. Parents often have a lot of opinions about how kids should or shouldn't live their life, but they usually don't see the same vision that the child does. I know I felt like this with my parents. And at a certain point, I had to realize I can't keep overthinking and stressing about what they think I should do, because ultimately I'd be naive to think I can mirror what they wanted and still get a life that felt right for me. I could do everything they said, and they might feel incredibly overjoyed and proud of me, but I might still feel very unfulfilled. Being that they are my parents, they have a lot more life experience than me. They have learned a lot from their choices, and I, as their child in some way, am still kind of like their chance to do things over and do things differently. So I do think all of their advice is good advice, but I also had to look at where I'm at, what I want, and decipher what applies to me and what doesn't. And you should do the same. Speaking of parents, I know a lot of them are just regurgitating things that their parents told them. My least favorite of the phrases they've learned is being something along the lines of, well, that's just the way the world is, and sorry, life's not fair, as a way to excuse their actions. I absolutely hate that phrase, and I hate that mindset, because it's like, you are the world, you are people, you decide the way things go, and your impact matters. If someone has ever said this to you, please, please, please don't make this your worldview. Think about how you felt when someone first said that to you. How untrue it felt, how unfair it felt. I remember when someone first said that to me, and to me it just sounded like they had given up. I want this podcast to remind you that you have the power to make the world a better place, even if it's just for a couple of people. The people saying this are part of the problem, but they also could be part of the solution. If everyone always just said, well, that's just the way things are, then there'd be no improvements. Someone had to dream of something better and make it happen, and they proved that things no longer had to be that one way. Instead of teaching that the world is cold and unforgiving, we could be the example that it isn't. And whoever's perspective we change will know that as their truth, and instead teach that lesson instead of the one that we first learned. I don't know if it's true for you guys, but it's not like I don't understand where those people were coming from when they said those ugly phrases. There are so many issues in the world, it's so overwhelming, and it's so easy to think, I'm just one person, how am I ever really going to make a change? That is just the way the world is. And often it's hard to feel like my kindness is making any difference at all. It's hard to feel like you're making any change at all, and it just seems easier to let the world make you mean. But I know that one person's kindness to me on a really hard day makes a world of difference. So I just know that your love and happiness does have a positive effect on the world, even if you can't see it right away. Often, when people start to view the world as an ugly place, they stop trying to do anything about it. They stop caring. They feel like it's irredeemable, so what's the point? They feel disconnected from those struggling, and they just blame it on the necessary evils of the world, which is an incredibly dangerous thought because it makes people really complacent on what's going on. Instead, we have to continue to take pride in our communities, pour love into them for those who aren't as fortunate and have never had an example that somebody actually does care about them. I've been trying to start small, reminding myself that you can't save the world all in one day. When you feel a sense of, I don't know if it's responsibility or just protectiveness over the earth, it's impossible to give in and give up. It is our home after all. And if we don't care about each other, then who's going to, you know? I want to share a personal story that's helped inspire today's episode. A couple months ago, my partner really upset me. In hindsight, it was small. But with everything going on at the time, it felt much bigger. To give you some idea of what it was without airing out our dirty laundry, it was the equivalent of not putting their laundry away or not doing the dishes. On a normal day, it would be no biggie, but with the stress of work and school and whatever else the day brought me, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. I felt this intense anger at the situation, at him, at me for being so angry, and my brain really just started to spiral. I was exhausted from work, and truthfully, I did not feel like being healthy. I did not feel like having a kind conversation with him, and the fact that he was at work made it that much easier to have that mindset. I knew I had wine in the fridge, I had some tree on the counter, and I thought just a little of either would help me chill out. It'd make it easier for me not to feel so upset, and I'd just be able to go to bed without rehashing the whole thing over and over in my mind. And I was by myself at the house, so I thought no one could judge me. What the heck? Who cares if I use a glass of wine to cope with a situation? People have done much worse. But before I did anything, I swear I had a That's So Raven flashback to me being 18 and making a deal with myself that I would never ever use a substance to get rid of or suppress a feeling. I felt like at the time, and I still do, feel like that's how addiction probably gets started. I had firsthand seen how addiction hurts so many people, the person addicted, their friends, their family, and even strangers. I knew even as a teenager that feelings had to be felt in order to be processed and in order to pass. When you push them down, they just come right back up, usually compounded with regret. If you never feel them, you never see what they're teaching you, which means you usually keep reliving the same type of situations. And when those feelings get pushed down for so long, when they finally do get dealt with, they're often amplified. So I made this a rule because I knew even then it was better to just deal with things head on. I realized if I had a drink or a smoke, I'd break that promise, which I absolutely didn't want to do, but I sure as hell did not want to deal with the emotions either. The devil on my shoulder thought, you're being so dramatic. One drink or hit isn't going to cause an addiction. You're making this a much bigger deal than it is. At this point, I'm basically having a full-on conversation in my mind. But the angel on my shoulder is like, what if it did? What if I completely stopped dealing with uncomfortable emotions because I had access to something and I'd always push them away? I'd have to sit with that. I had to sit with knowing that my past self had all the answers. And I thought about what the conversation would look like between my 18-year-old self, asking my now self, what happened? You had all the answers as a teenager, and now you're having to relearn something you already knew. I thought about, what would I even answer? What would I blame it on? What would have swayed me or steered me right? Which I want to recognize that either way, it would have been 100% my choice. It would have been nobody's fault if I chose to go down a path against my better judgment. But I thought about, how do substances become a coping mechanism in the first place? And I realized, at 21, living in a nightlife city, that's not really going to raise any red flags. After a shift of bartending, if I go, who's coming to the bar? I need an effing drink after day. No one's batting an eye or thinking that's an unhealthy mindset. If I repost a meme about how life is so stressful, I'm going to get high until I'm nonverbal, most people are sliding up and agreeing instead of checking in. And I don't say this to say that those people not checking in on me would have been bad people, or the person getting a drink after a hard day is an alcoholic. I just want to point out, in a society where using a substance to cope is so normalized, how do you know when it's become unhealthy? I started to think, damn, I really wish that there was this community that when I was sad, anxious, upset, frustrated, they'd offer to journal with me, meditate with me, maybe cook or go on a walk or go garden. They'd offer a hike and they'd scream at the top of the mountain. And I wish drinking or smoking was last on the list. I wish I had, a group of friends that using art or community or nature was more normalized while using a substance was something more taboo. And I realized in that moment, why can't I be the start of that community? Doesn't every community just start with a person? Maybe a person that feels like they don't belong anywhere. Then they find someone else who feels the same, and then they go and they influence others, and it just grows. I mean, isn't everything that's here right now, wasn't that once just a thought? I had to realize then that I can't build this into something real without living the life that I craved or taking the steps I'd want to be held accountable to. So that night, instead of drinking or smoking or pushing my partner away, I went against what felt familiar. I did a breathing exercise, and when he got home, I did the uncomfortable thing, and I opened up to him. And so many things came out that I didn't even know that I was holding in. And we talked until the sun came up. And our bond got better, and our understanding of each other's needs got better. And none of that would have happened if I had a glass of wine and just went to bed. So this huge, long story to say, I love this little community that we are building right here. And if you still want that drink or smoke after the long, hard day at work or school or the argument with your roommate, I'd be happy to keep you company with no judgment. But just know I'd be just as happy and excited to share a coloring book with you or bake cookies or decompress watching an old Christmas movie. Here are some final messages for the Lovebug family. In a world that is all about hustle and bustle and improvement, know that I am just glad that you're here. Remember to be forgiving to your present self and don't compare yourself to anybody else. Everyone's journey looks a little bit different and we have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. New Year's can be a really difficult time for self-love, so treat yourself extra kindly this month. And when you feel like your current self isn't deserving of love, treat yourself how you treat childhood you. You would make sure they were fed right. You'd make sure they got outside, they got some sun. You would make sure that they were talked to softly. So do the same for yourself. And with that, I'd like to conclude our second episode with texting 3 people that you love them right now, right this second, as you're listening to this podcast. Text those 3 people. It doesn't have to be a long, intricate, detailed text. Just a simple I love you. I would give a lot to be able to text or call my grandpa right now and hear his response. And there is no such thing as telling somebody too many times. So I will give you some space and some time to do that, but I really hope that you do. Have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, love bugs. Join the family at the Love Bug Lounge on TikTok and Instagram. Please shoot a DM about future podcast episodes, about what you want to hear. I absolutely would love to know. Please give this episode some love. Give it a thumbs up or stars or whatever, and help it reach everyone who needs to hear it. I love you guys. I'll see you soon.